Oh, thank you so much for being here. I know you're a lifelong Trekkie. So as a lifelong Trekkie, what was your reaction when you got this job?
That's a question a lot of people ask, and my head exploded. It was one of those things where you sort of think about the 13-year-old self who was watching Star Trek all the time when I was a kid. I grew up on The Next Generation, which was the late 80s and early 90s. And, I was every week glued to the TV. So when the opportunity even arose, it was like, well, no way, they're not going to want me. They're going to want somebody else. And then it happened, and I pretty much lost my mind. Yeah.
I want to start with the theme you composed for it, because it's very mysterious, but it's also very hopeful, which is the ultimate message of Star Trek. And then you end with the OG fanfare. Mm-hmm. So what was your approach to tackling the theme song?
One of the things we talked about wanting to do is to sort of update the sound of what a score for Star Trek could be to a little bit more of a modern take, which was, a little more than just a traditional orchestral score, which we knew we wanted to go in that direction, but we wanted to sort of add something a little more modern. But the idea of the show is a more compassionate and emotional take on the character interactions. So I wanted to feel what that was going to be like, and I tried to put that into the theme, but the original idea came from something called it's a musical theory called common tone, which is when a group of chords share one note, and as you change chords, there's one note in the chord structure that doesn't change. And I was trying to sort of, in my mind, and I don't know if it actually happens musically, that sort of represents the unity in the universe and bringing together all kinds of.
I think that works, especially at the end when you get the.
Well,
yeah.
and then wanting to nod to Mr. Courage's iconic fanfare. So that was sort of the idea of trying to get an idea of what I thought the show could be into the theme.
Mm-hmm. Like when you're working with an iconic IP like Star Trek that has such a well-known sound to fans everywhere, like how important or difficult is it for you to pay homage to that? Like when you incorporate, the fanfare at the end while also creating your own sound and a new take?
Well, I mean, it's terrifying. It's a terrifying thing to be, writing music for this franchise that has I mean, Jerry Goldsmith and Alexander Courage and Michael Giacchino and James Horner and all these people have written such fantastic music, and I'm forgetting the shows as well, Jay Chataway and Ron Moore, but it was really trying to set our own tone. We live in this world of Star Trek, but we want to create our own sort of identity and how to do that and still sort of pay some homage. So occasionally nodding to the Courage theme, which I did at the very beginning and then didn't do again until the very end, the very last episode. But there's one thing we always say when I'm in the studio recording the orchestra, we record parts of the orchestra separately. I record the strings in the morning and the brass in the afternoon to have a little more control over editorially. And when we add these big brass moments, these big horn moments, all of a sudden the score becomes Star Trek. And we all sit there and go, oh, now it's a Star Trek score, now that there's all these horns on it. So it's interesting how you can add little flavors of what they did on those original scores to sort of bring it into that sound,
Mm-hmm. What I love about your work for the show is the show itself is very cinematic, and I feel like the music really reflects that because it's very sweeping during the quieter character moments, not just battle sequences and stuff. So was that a goal of yours?
Well, yes, I think it was a goal. One of the things I like to do as a composer is, well, I should say one of the things I don't like to do is I don't like to necessarily score the action. I like to score what a character is feeling more than what a character is doing. And in order to do that with this show, it was really trying to focus in on the character work and the interpersonal character relationships between all these characters, and that was sort of new, I think, for Star Trek, and focusing on that. and we talked a lot about that at the very beginning of the show, and how doing that might set the whole thing apart slightly from what had been done before.
I think for the Klingons in particular, because in the past, like even in the movies, like their score is very like ominous. Like it's like very clear, like they're the bad guys. But I think for like on the show, like we get so much of the Klingon story. Like there's so much, like there's like a couple episodes where half the episode is just in Klingon and you're reading subtitles. But I like your score is it's a lot more, it's muted in a good way for it, because like they're the heroes of their own story.
And that's exactly what we talked about, you know, wanting to get the audience to at least try to empathize with them. They are the bad guys only from our perspective with our glasses on. Like if you take our glasses off and put their glasses on, well, we're the bad guys. So how do you play it without always making them feel like, okay, Klingons are on, bum, bum, bum. But
it's time for the bad guys.
Right.
Like they're here.
That gets old after a while. So in order to sort of make them feel more, I don't want to say humanized, because they're obviously not human, but to have some humanity, to give them some humanity, and to what I think giving them humanity helps the audience to empathize with them as they also empathize with the humans.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the whole Bach storyline. Yeah.
Crossing between being Klingon and not being Klingon and being human.
I want to mention the Caecilian opera that you composed in I think episode 12. Yep. Yeah. I thought it was beautiful, and I thought it added so much depth to the relationship between Stamets and Culber. So how did you create that piece?
Well, okay, so that was also one of those terrifying moments where you get the phone call from a producer around episode 2 or 3 saying, okay, so we're writing episode 12 and we need you to write an opera.
Have you ever written an opera before?
No, I'd never know. I was like, okay. So I hung up the phone and freaked out. I freaked out. I was like, I don't know, what am I going to do? How am I going to write an opera? And then what I realized is I sort of had to apply, you know, what I've been doing my whole career, which is writing songs. And I just have to sort of look at it from a different perspective. And it's a song, but an aria is sung in a different way. And I sort of had to figure out how I can apply that logic to writing an aria, a part of an opera. Because the idea was it was something that they had listened to, something that Culbert loved, Stamets hated, and how that related to their story. And it comes back in 13, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say that it might or might not appear in season 2.
Season 2 spoiler.
It might not appear in season 2. Wow.
Sources confirm.
I hope they're not here. You know, actually, I have no idea. CBS will call me up and say, okay, remember, you can't talk about any season 2 story points. I'm like, I don't know any season 2 story points. How can I talk about anything? So I don't actually know, except for
did you make
other
it
things.
Like purposely? But I love like the piece was like a classical opera. Like I don't know like what I was expecting to hear, but I love that it was because like we know like they saw La Boheme. So right. I thought, like, what did you like wanted to harken back to that?
Well, you know, not specifically that. They said it was supposed to be Caecilians are a race of aliens, and it was supposed to be written and performed by a Caecilian. I was like, well, I don't know what that sounds like. I don't know what a Caecilian sounds like. Are you asking me to write something in a different language to be sung by something that doesn't sound like the human voice? Like, well, you know, what's the real idea here? And they were like, well, you figure it out. And I was like, great, thanks for that. So then I just made a decision. I was like, well, okay, so we're going to have it sound like we understand it to sound. And I called a friend of mine, Ayana, who's a singer, and I said, do you happen to sing any opera? And she said, yeah. So she came down and I played her this melody that I was writing, and I said, how would you sing this passage right here? And you know, she was like, okay, show me the melody. So I showed her the melody, and then she started singing. I was like, oh, okay. Now I understand how that can work in this. And then I wrote the music, had her come back in and sing this whole piece of music.
Well, it was beautiful.
Thank you.
And in the spoiler alert, in the season finale, in the final moments.
Wait, what?
I mean, sorry if you guys haven't seen it yet, but they come across the Enterprise and we hear the original theme.
Had to do that.
So how did you arrange that for that scene?
So that was that's a funny story, actually. So I always knew that we were going to be head to head. The Discovery and the Enterprise were going to be head to head at the end of the episode. And I, in my mind, thought, okay, whatever music I have to write prior to that, I will think about how to thread in the Courage fanfare. So when the Enterprise appears, you hear the ba 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 ba, and I thought, oh, that'll be great. Like, and even when I was writing that, and the Enterprise appeared, and I played the thing on my keyboard, I got teary. It was the weirdest thing. It was because I was caught up in the moment of something that I knew was going to happen, but I still got all emotional about it.
I think everyone did when they.
Yeah, I'm sure. But then we go right from that into the only time we play the original end title music, and we did that for episode 15 only. And when I was recording the Caecilian opera, Ayana was in the booth, and I thought, why don't I let me try something? And I wrote down the notes of the vocal part in it, and I handed her the page, and I said, "Hey, can you sing this into the microphone?" So she sang it into the microphone, and it was like, holy shit. It's
so that's all
right. And so I immediately recorded it on my iPhone and sent it to Alex Kurtzman, who's our executive producer. And I said, check this out. And he was like, oh my God, it's amazing. We have to do that for episode 15. And that's sort of how that came about. And then put together a big band, like 70-piece band or something like that, and recorded the end titled music, which was, I was on the pulpit on the thing that you do, whatever.
You were conducting.
I was conducting, but the moment that the band started to play, I got,
you were like teary.
I didn't tear up, but I was so in that moment. I don't know that I've been that much in a moment before on the stand, on the conductor's podium. It felt like nothing I'd ever felt before.
You're a Trekkie.
Well, there's that, and there's sort of like that feeling of Star Trek as a thing. It has one of those. It just feels important to me somehow. Like it has such lineage and such history that I felt like, oh, I got swept up in that moment. It was pretty incredible.
So you already dropped some spoilers for season 2. So what else?
I didn't do that.
I don't
know. No.
Someone did. Someone did in the last 5 minutes. So what are you allowed to tease about next season? We have the Enterprise. Are we going to hear more?
We have Captain Pike.
Yeah, we have Captain Pike.
And so I'm assuming I'll have to write like a Pike theme. And I think that there are some other characters that you might see that might show up. I don't know who. I didn't say anything. There's really not much more I can tell you.
Have you started work on it?
Yes and no. So starting work is I'm reading scripts and I'm sort of getting acquainted with what the tonality of the show is going to be in season 2, which is we're taking a different turn. Like the war has ended, so we're no longer in this war. So I think things become a little more adventurous. I think things become a little more swashbuckling.
So they're pirates, is what you're saying.
There are space pirates.
Wow, that's your headline. So.
CBS. I did not say that.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you, Jeff, for participating tonight. Space pirates. If you got nothing else out of this, space pirates.